So we never came across any discrimination. It was only when, in 1939, 40, and 41, I ran into German and Czech Jews who came here as refugees. And it was from them that I learned that there was discrimination in housing against Jews in Toronto. Because they, first of all, they weren't particularly interested in living in a Jewish district. And they found, when they applied in other areas, they couldn't get in. Or they were, I remember the expression, wo Juden dürfen nicht wohnen, where Jews are not permitted to live. Because I was teaching them English. That's how I got in touch with them, that's how I came in contact with them. And I was shocked to hear people coming from refugees from Nazism, and they're talking about my city as having places where Jews are not permitted. I felt very uneasy about that. Something wrong with these people coming from Nazi Germany and being refused here. And then later on, years later, when I came to Congress, I learned more about it. The late Al Lipson, a dentist who was active in B'nai B'rith, told me that when he came back from the war, he was still in his uniform, he had been a dentist, he was in the dental corps. They were looking for a house out in the Queensway area, and he was just about to close the deal when somehow or other it emerged that he was Jewish. He couldn't tell them his name, or his appearance. And he was off. See, in those days there were either they had gentlemen's agreements from a movie of the same name, or they had actually official covenants, restrictive covenants, which were fairly common. There were a covenant that said this land may not be sold, let, leased, or rented. Sometimes sometimes the covenants would read to Jews or other objectionable races. And it wasn't until 1945 a famous WEA case, the Workers' Educational Association, won a house in a raffle. They discovered there was one of these racially restricted covenants on it, so it came before the court to have it ruled invalid. And Judge Keeler Mackay, who, by the way, ironically, this is never been mentioned publicly, himself lived in the Queensway area, that same area that was restricted. He probably wasn't aware of it. Ruled that such covenants are against public policy. Nobody challenged that, you see. That's why it was so easy for him to say so. 3 years later, another judge ruled contrary, said these are valid. So it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Oops, sorry. So it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, which eventually ruled that these covenants were invalid. Not for the reason we wanted, not on public policy, but on grounds of uncertainty, which in theory we wouldn't like. It means you cannot tell who is a Jew. But actually it didn't matter. As one of the lawyers who later became a judge, Supreme Court judge himself, told us, as far as the public is concerned, the impression it will be left such covenants are invalid. And the reasons nobody ever goes into. And that's exactly what happened. Okay.
Who would make these covenants? I mean, how?
One of them was, there was an MP named Murphy who lived in Sarnia, that property along there. Lawyers would draw them up, I suppose.
But, I mean, would they be for groups or for individual houses?
Both. For instance, the WEA case was for an individual house. The other case that was upheld, and then that was, in which the covenant was upheld, was for a group in Beach of Pines, sort of a summer group in Grand Bend, Ontario, Georgian Bay.
And would would the owner or the builder, or does it say that it's go to a lawyer and draw this up? Or?